Imagine this. You're in the middle of a bustling city. The screech of car tires, the ping of messages, the murmur of strangers, and the unending scroll of opinions flood your senses. Screens glow. Notifications flare. The pressure to respond, to act, to decide, to succeed, is constant. Yet amid this technological symphony, you're struck by an unexpected sensation. Not clarity. Not inspiration. But disorientation. It's not the noise that's unbearable. It's the silence beneath it. You pause, briefly, between notifications. A strange thought creeps in: what am I even doing with my life? You brush it off. But it returns. Louder, more persistent. Not shouted, but whispered deep within. Is this what I was made for? The world has given you everything: information, access, opportunity, even identity options. Yet for all the choices, all the hashtags about living your truth, something vital is missing. Direction. Meaning. Calling. Think about this. In an age where you're told you can be anything, why is it so hard to know what you're meant to be? You scroll past a friend's wedding post. Another's business launch. Someone else is writing a book. Someone else is climbing mountains in Peru. And what about you? You're staring at your screen, not even sure if you're in the right job, the right city, the right story. You feel busy, but not productive. Connected, but not seen. Successful, but not fulfilled. We've mistaken activity for purpose. We've confused noise for clarity. And somewhere along the line, we forgot to ask the only question that matters. Who am I when the noise fades? There's a paradox here that most never dare confront. We live in an age of endless communication, yet few hear the voice that matters most, the one buried in the deepest chambers of the soul. What if your calling isn't something you chase, but something you recover? What if it's not a path you pave, but a voice you heed? Calling isn't about ambition. It's about alignment. It isn't about adding more to your life, it's about subtracting the noise until what's real remains. But here's the danger: you can live your entire life succeeding at the wrong things. You can master the algorithm, win applause, and still miss your purpose. Like a compass spinning with no true north, modern life rewards movement, even when it's aimless. So how did we get here? What unseen forces pulled us off course? What happened to that inner certainty, the ancient echo that once said, "This is who I am"? You were born with a calling. You were designed with intention. But the noise has become your narrative. And the world is loud, because it's afraid of silence. Because in silence, truth speaks. Let's go deeper. Let's uncover why this calling feels so elusive. Let's ask the questions society has taught you to avoid. Are you ready? There's something tragically ironic about modern life. You have more freedom than any generation before you, yet feel more lost than ever. The hidden crisis is not a lack of opportunity, but a fragmented identity. We've traded the solid ground of truth for the shifting sands of preference. We curate selves. We don roles. We say, "This is who I am," without ever asking, "Is this who I was made to be?" Augustine of Hippo once wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." But today, that restlessness isn't seen as holy. It's pathologized. We medicate it, distract it, or label it a phase of figuring things out. But what if that restlessness isn't a flaw? What if it's the compass needle vibrating, desperate to find true north? Let's go deeper. Carl Jung observed that modern man suffers from a loss of meaning. He doesn't know where he belongs in the universe. He's been uprooted from archetype, tradition, transcendence. The ego was never meant to carry the full weight of identity, and yet that's precisely what we've demanded of it. James K. A. Smith reminds us that we are not just thinking creatures, we are desiring ones. And the world has learned to shape our desires before we even become aware of them. Through advertising, social norms, and digital feedback loops, our hearts are constantly being trained to love the wrong things. Pascal called it the God-shaped vacuum, a void nothing else can fill. But the modern world offers a buffet of distractions, hoping we won't notice the hunger never leaves. And so we chase careers, applause, experiences. Even morality becomes a brand. Purpose becomes performance. But here's the cost. We no longer listen for calling, we manufacture it. We are told to follow our passion, yet never taught how to discern truth. We're told to be ourselves, but not how to know ourselves. And most disturbingly, we're told we can be anything, except created. Because to be created is to be accountable. To be called is to admit that you didn't invent yourself. That you are not the author, but the page. That's why the noise persists. It's not just a distraction. It's a defense mechanism against silence, because silence might confront you with God. Thomas Aquinas believed that the ultimate end of man is the beatific vision, the face of God. Yet today, the ultimate end seems to be visibility itself. We don't want to see God, we want to be seen. The algorithm becomes our mirror. Likes become our liturgy. And calling becomes a carefully filtered projection. But no filter can hide the ache. So the real question is not, how do I find my calling? But, what am I running from that keeps me from hearing it? Something deeper must be rediscovered, an identity not self-made, but soul-born. A truth older than modern psychology, deeper than dopamine hits. A calling that calls not to your ego, but to your essence. And that essence? It's not random. It's not abstract. It's been echoing since Eden. But first, we must see what happens when we ignore it. Try to see this. A man wakes up every morning before the sun rises. He sips his coffee in silence, ties his tie, glances at the mirror, his face composed but hollow. He boards the train, surrounded by others just like him, well-dressed, well-paid, and quietly withering. On paper, his life is a success. But when no one's watching, he whispers, "I feel like I'm dying." Not because he's depressed, exactly. But because he's become a stranger to himself. This man isn't rare. He is legion. He is the artist who abandoned his gift for a salary. The teacher who drowned in bureaucracy and forgot the joy of wonder. The student whose dreams were reshaped by algorithmic popularity. This is what happens when calling is lost. You don't merely drift from your purpose. You fracture from your soul. When the voice of calling is ignored, it doesn't go silent. It goes underground. It seeps into your psyche as anxiety, numbness, anger, confusion. The body keeps the score. And the heart, denied its truth, turns cold. You start performing your life rather than living it. The consequences aren't just individual. They're societal. Think about how work has become worship, but not in a sacred sense. In the absence of calling, career becomes religion, and productivity becomes salvation. Value is measured not in being, but in output. Your soul becomes a cog, your time a commodity. But the human soul wasn't designed to be monetized. It was designed to mirror something eternal. C.S. Lewis warned of this subtle dehumanization. He wrote of men without chests, people whose rational mind and base instincts were intact, but whose moral core, the seat of calling and virtue, had gone numb. We are raising such men and women today, sharp minds, shallow hearts. Then comes the emotional fallout. Burnout disguised as ambition. Loneliness mistaken for independence. Anxiety treated as a glitch in the system rather than a spiritual siren. Why is mental illness surging in the most connected era in history? Why do people scroll for hours but feel more invisible than ever? Because they've forgotten who they are. Without calling, identity becomes reactive. You shape yourself around trends, expectations, traumas. And when culture rewards adaptability over authenticity, the self becomes plastic. But plastic doesn't breathe. It doesn't bleed. And eventually, it cracks. Soren Kierkegaard said the greatest despair is not to be conscious of having a self. Not to lose your job, or your relationship, or even your health, but to lose yourself, while still appearing functional. We were made for something more. We weren't meant to navigate life using popularity as a compass. You were not born for echo chambers, you were born for echoing the voice of your maker. But this disconnection goes deeper. It distorts how we love, how we lead, how we live. Families fracture when calling is ignored. Relationships become transactions. Churches become performances. And the deepest truths are reduced to lifestyle choices. And so we ask ourselves, why do I feel numb? Why does everything feel off? Because you're living a script you didn't write. Because you exchanged a calling for a career, a mission for marketing, a soul for survival. This is not just a personal crisis. It's a cultural one. And if we don't confront it, the drift becomes destiny. But here's the hope, the drift is reversible. The fracture can be healed. The voice can still be heard. Because calling doesn't die. It waits. Let's talk about how to hear it again. Close your eyes and listen. Not with your ears. With your heart. What do you hear beneath the chaos? Beyond the metrics, the expectations, the internalized voices of failure or pride? That still, small voice, it's faint, but persistent. The one you've ignored, but never fully silenced. It speaks not in noise, but in weight. Not in urgency, but in truth. This is where resistance begins. Not resistance against the world, but against the lie that you are your resume. Against the pressure to define yourself by income, relevance, or applause. Against the myth that you must invent your identity from scratch. To reclaim your calling, you must unlearn what the world taught you about purpose. Start here. You are not a machine. You are not an algorithm. You are not a random configuration of atoms. You are called. Not manufactured. Not self-invented. Called, which means someone is calling. John Calvin wrote of the inner testimony of the Spirit, a divine whisper within us that confirms our identity, not by evidence or logic alone, but by existential weight. The deepest truths are not proven. They are recognized. That's the key. Your calling won't be found in a job description or personality quiz. It will be found where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need. But this kind of discernment takes silence. Real silence. The uncomfortable kind. The holy kind. And in that silence, you'll need courage, to face what you've avoided. To lay down false identities. To grieve wasted years. But also, to receive something better. Something true. G.K. Chesterton once said that every man who knocks on the door of a brothel is looking for God. The same could be said for ambition, addiction, and applause. Underneath it all, we are searching for meaning. And meaning is never found apart from the one who made you. That's why calling begins not with action, but with surrender. And surrender is not weakness. It's alignment. The moment you stop trying to create your worth, and start receiving it, you become dangerous to the world system. Because now you're no longer chasing wind. You're planting roots. Throughout history, those who rediscovered calling were never the loudest or the trendiest. But they were the most alive. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who resisted the Nazi regime, knew his calling would cost him everything, but he followed anyway. Mother Teresa heard a voice in a train station, calling her to serve the poorest of the poor, and she obeyed. William Wilberforce turned down political prestige to abolish slavery, because his calling burned brighter than comfort. You don't need to be famous. You just need to be faithful. So how do you begin? Start by cultivating sacred silence, make space for stillness regularly. In the quiet, you'll hear more than noise fading, you'll begin to hear the voice within. Read scripture not merely to gather information, but to be transformed by its truth. Let it read you, shape you, and uncover what lies beneath the surface. Pay attention to your burdens. What breaks your heart is often what you're called to heal. Your tears carry clues. Don't walk this journey alone. Calling flourishes in the rich soil of community, not in isolation. And above all, obey what you already know. Often, clarity doesn't come before the first step, it comes as you move. And most of all, pray not for success, but for alignment. Because the most radical thing you can do in a world of noise is listen. Visualize this. You're standing at the edge of a quiet forest at dawn. No screens. No clocks. Just the rhythm of the wind through the trees and the sound of your own heartbeat. For the first time in years, there's no one to impress. No algorithm to feed. No mask to wear. Just you. And in that stillness, something stirs. Not outside you, but within. A memory. Not of an event, but of a knowing. A distant certainty that feels older than your bones. You were made. You were wanted. You were named before the noise. You realize something profound, not all at once, but in waves. Your calling is not a career move. It's not an aesthetic. It's not even about you. Your calling is a response. A response to a voice that spoke before you could speak. To a father who saw you in your unformed frame and said, "Mine." Genesis says that God formed man from the dust and breathed into him the breath of life. That breath, that divine breath, is what animates your calling. You were not built for busyness. You were designed for communion. And here's the truth modernity cannot manufacture. Your calling is not discovered through striving, but received through intimacy. Think about that. All your anxiety, all your comparison, all your exhaustion, they were symptoms of a deeper forgetting, that before the world told you who to be, God whispered who you are. Let that sink in. You are not a product of trends. You are not a slave to performance. You are the echo of a voice that said, "Let there be light," and also said, "You are my beloved." And this is the paradox that will save you. To find your calling, you must first lose your autonomy. To gain your life, you must first lay it down. Because true freedom is not doing whatever you want. True freedom is the ability to become who you were always meant to be. And who were you meant to be? A reflection. An image. A vessel of glory. Imago Dei, the image of God, is not a theological abstraction. It is your essence. It is why your heart longs for justice, for beauty, for purpose. It is why noise feels unnatural. You were made for stillness. For the garden. For the voice that walks in the cool of day. But here's the tragedy, and the hope. We left the garden. But the gardener came after us. Christ didn't just come to forgive sins. He came to restore the call. He looked fishermen in the eyes and said, "Follow me." He touched the leper and said, "Be clean." He called the dead from tombs and the rich from illusions. He's calling still. And maybe that's why you feel this stirring now. Not because you've figured everything out, but because your soul remembers its origin. Because the one who formed you is still forming you. Because in a world that monetizes your confusion, Christ offers clarity not as information, but as invitation. Not, "Find your truth," but, "I am the truth." Not, "Create your identity," but, "You are my workmanship." Not, "Chase success," but, "Take up your cross and follow me." It's radical. It's terrifying. And it's freedom. Because now you don't need to prove yourself. You only need to respond. You were not meant to do everything. You were meant to do the one thing that bears eternal weight. And it may not look glamorous. It may be parenting faithfully, quietly. It may be serving in obscurity. It may be creating art no one sees but heaven. But in God's economy, faithfulness is fruitfulness. And your calling is not measured in results, but in obedience. So, take off the masks. Step out of the algorithm. Lay down the curated life. And listen. Can you hear it? The call you thought you lost, was never lost. It was waiting. Patient. Persistent. Holy. Waiting for you to stop striving. And to start responding. What lingered in your mind after watching this video? Share your thoughts in the comments, your voice matters here. Thank you for reflecting with me. If something in this stirred you, please like, subscribe, and keep exploring the depths of your inner life. Until next time, stay curious. Because the examined life is still worth living.